Hello, I'm Justin Henry, your instructor for Introduction to World Religions. This is a 7-week accelerated course, so it's going to be a little hard for us to study all of the great religions of the world in a matter of just a few weeks, but we're going to do our best to run through the major traditions and to try to compare how they're similar and different as best we can. So this is going to be a crash course in the major religions of the world and in the study of comparative religion. What can we say meaningfully about how these religions compare and relate to each other? When I used to teach at Loyola University in Chicago, this class was listed as Theo 1111, so not as religious studies, but as theology.
Which literally means the study of God, the study of theos. So if you went to study religion a century ago, you would probably be training to be a preacher or a pastor or a minister, basically, right? So you'd be studying Latin and Greek, and you'd be studying the Bible. Now, in the 21st century, when there are more religious studies departments than there are divinity schools or pastoral schools, we study all religions not from the point of view of the Bible as the singular focus, but rather from the point of view of religion as something that we can study through the perspectives of the other departments that you find within a university. This is what's called the academic study of religion. So religious studies draws on other departments like history. So I have a PhD in the history of religions. I'm a historian. My focus is South Asia, India, and Sri Lanka. So I'm a historian. Also the sociology of religion, the psychology of religion, even people study the neuroscience of religion. So going into the hard sciences field. You have to study religion through these different lenses because world religions can be very different from one another. If we're in Western religion, Western monotheism, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all have one holy book. The Hebrew Bible for Jews, the Bible for Christians, the Quran for Muslims. There is one book that is the revealed truth of that religion. But other religious traditions, as we'll see over the coming weeks, have a very different idea of what scripture looks like. So in Hinduism and Buddhism, there's not just one Bible. There's not one Hindu Bible or one Buddhist Bible, but rather a cumulative tradition built up out of sacred books and commentaries on those books over the centuries. So no one single book that is authoritative for all Hindus or for all Buddhists. Very different idea than the idea of the one sacred book that you get in Western religions. The academic study of religion is not in the business of polemics, so saying that religion is bad, being Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens. But on the other side, it's not on the business of celebrating religion or trying to promote one religion over another, right? So I'm not Oprah or Deepak Chopra or the Dalai Lama or the Pope either. The academic study of religion tries to take a neutral or objective stance to say, okay, here's a very specific problem about this religious tradition. So when was this text written? How have people done this one ritual historically? How has it evolved? To take small little bit-sized answerable questions like that and then debate them on the basis of the evidence that we have at hand. So like I do textual history, so I read Buddhist texts in their original languages and try to write about it from that perspective. Other people do ethnographies and they go out and they actually live with religious communities in other parts of the world for a long time and write everything down and do a study or an ethnography of that. Those are people you find in the anthropology department. So that's what religious studies is all about, right? Not trying to promote any one religion over another, but just trying to find small answerable questions that we can all debate and come to some conclusion on the basis of a shared archive or a shared body of evidence. What then counts as a world religion? We're going to be looking, we only have time to look at the big five in this class. If this were a full semester class, I'd do a little bit more. But what people generally count as the big five of world religions are the three what are called the Abrahamic religions, or the big religions of Western monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. and then Hinduism. There are over 1 billion Hindus in the world, and Buddhism. There are over 500 million Buddhists in the world. So people will often talk about world religions in terms of sheer population. So Christianity right now is the most populous, the biggest religion in terms of number of people who belong to it in the world. Islam is the second most populous. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Christianity is the second fastest growing religion in the world. A lot of that has to do with birth rates in Africa right now for the same reason, Christians and Muslims in Africa. Then followed by Hinduism and Buddhism. Judaism we count as a world religion, not so much on the basis of influence, but because of its historical importance. So the first part of the Bible, what we call the Old Testament, is known as the Tanakh, or the Hebrew Bible for Jews. And because Judaism is the first religion in Western monotheism from which Christianity and Islam come out of, it is therefore disproportionately influential in terms of its number of adherents, in terms of the number of people who are actually Jews in the world today. We still count it as a world religion. Here's just a quick map version of how the 5 major world religions spread, a basic timeline of what we're going to be talking about in this class. So this is the Indus Valley civilization along the Indus River in what's now India and Pakistan. The Buddha is born in the 5th or 6th century BCE in what's now Nepal. Christianity, of course, the year 0. Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, 4th century under Constantine. And Islam is founded in the year 622 and spreads very rapidly throughout the Middle East and North Africa. To become today the second biggest religion in the world, second most populous religion in the world. And the next major catalyzing event in world religions is going to be colonialism and the age of exploration, so the colonization by Europeans of the Americas and Asia as well. So this is what gets Christianity on top in terms of number of people who belong to the religion. One major important difference between religious traditions is their cosmologies. A cosmology means your account of everything that there is in the universe, the study of the cosmos. So we have modern cosmologists like Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who try to figure out, what everything in the universe is and where it all came from and how old the universe is on the basis of, telescopes and radiometry and that kind of thing. Traditional religions have their own respective cosmologies too. In Western religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we have a cosmology that has a definite beginning point, which is creation, right? The book of Genesis in the Bible, and a definite end point, which is the end of days, judgment day, the reckoning. And that's it. So there is a beginning and an end to time. Time is a straight line. We are all born and die at some time on that straight line. And as such, that linear time cosmology produces a one and done attitude towards soteriology, or the theory of how it is that you obtain salvation or go to heaven and obtain eternal happiness after death. You just get one chance. You're just born one time on that span of time from creation until the end of days, and you get one chance to make the most of it, essentially. Eastern religions, by contrast, have a very different cosmological view. They account for the possibility of there being millions of worlds beyond our own. And rather than having just a single beginning point and end point of time, although the universe is created and destroyed periodically, it does this on a cycle. So after it's destroyed one time, it's created again anew, and this goes on forever. There's no beginning and end point to it. Time is not a straight line, but it is a cycle. So Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism have a cyclical time cosmology, which affects their view of what happens to us after we die and how many chances we have to make the most of it. So in Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea is that you want to escape the cycle of rebirth, what's called moksha. You are reborn basically an indefinite number of times until you're able to do that. You are reincarnated from one body to another, not necessarily a human body either, often a human body, but you can also be reborn as an animal. If you're a Jain or a Jain, you can be reborn as a tiny microscopic being. Hindus and Buddhists believe that you can be reborn as a celestial demigod who lives for hundreds of thousands of years, but nonetheless will eventually die and take on a new body. It's noteworthy that reincarnation was the default view of what happens to you after you die in most world cultures. So outside of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, most people, native cultures, people in Asia, even the ancient Greeks who called reincarnation metempsychosis, believed that after you die, you would your soul or spirit would pass into another living body and so on cyclically. It's really Western monotheism that had the anomalous view that you only get one chance, that you're only born and die one time, and you have to make the most of it during your one lifetime. That really was kind of the outsider minority view. And it's interesting to notice too that you find a lot of times this idea of reincarnation creeping back into the monotheistic tradition. So some Orthodox Jews still today believe in reincarnation. We get indications that in the Middle Ages in Christian Europe, there were some people who believed in reincarnation, so the church had to fight a whole internal crusade within Europe. This is one of the, it's called the Albigensian Crusade. This was one of the things that people were believing in, the heresy of reincarnation. And even recent surveys suggest 25% of Americans, 25% or more, if you ask them, say that they believe in reincarnation. So this is, of course, inconsistent with how we ordinarily understand Christianity to work, right? But it is testament to the enduring popularity of the idea of reincarnation. So we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about Buddhism and Buddhism in America, the last week of class. Along with different cosmologies, different religions have unique ways of conceptualizing God or the divine, what they mean, what they look like. Our cartoon version of what the God of the Bible looks like is, of course, a wise old man with a beard seated on a throne. It is an image that you even find in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, when God is described in these anthropomorphic terms as sitting on his celestial throne. And living in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Of course, God has many different forms in the Bible. He appears in various theophanies or different kinds of appearances as the burning bush to Moses and so forth. There's a lot to suggest in the Bible, both the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament, that we aren't meant to think only of God as an anthropomorphic figure, as like a man on a throne, right? He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He's beyond what we really can understand. There has been throughout the history of Christianity, and indeed throughout the history of Western monotheism, a debate as to whether or not God should even be depicted in visual terms. This is a debate between those who believe that the divine can be depicted iconographists versus those who think that he cannot be depicted an iconographer. So iconism versus an iconism. Debate between Christians themselves after the Protestant Reformation in Europe. The early Calvinist Reformed churches didn't want to have any pictures of anything to do with God or even Jesus anywhere. So this is the altar of a reconstructed early 16th century Calvinist church, and you see that there's nothing there. There's just a vase of flowers. There's not even a cross. They didn't want to risk it. In the Catholic tradition, of course, there's no problem in representing saints or Jesus or Mary. The idea is not that you are committing idolatry and worshiping the image itself, but rather that you are worshiping the idea, the archetype, the idea beyond the image through the image, that the image is merely a devotional aid to allow you to worship the archetype itself. So this is how Roman Catholics explain the fact that they have statues and stained glass windows. Islam has come down very hard on the position of an iconography, so an iconic representations of the divine. You should not represent God through any sort of picture because there is a danger that in doing so, you are limiting God, who is really beyond our capacity to express in a single concept or image into one image, and confusing people that God is somehow limited in that way. Also in Islam, you're not supposed to represent the prophets of God in pictures because there's the danger that people might mistake them for being divine and worship them. So you're not supposed to represent God or his prophets in Islam. Hindus have no problem generally with representing the divine in pictorial form, in statue or picture form, because they don't think that there would ever be a confusion as to the limited power of the God, the limited nature of the God represented only in one image. They don't think that people would make the mistake of thinking this is all there is, the God just in this one form.
As part of your homework for Friday, I'm asking you to reflect on how does the different ideas of God or divinity are reflected between traditions. So I'm asking you to look at the first little bit of the book of Genesis from the Bible and the creation hymn from the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is the earliest Hindu text. It's about 3,200 years old. And in each we get a totally different representation of how it is that the universe came into being at the beginning of time. The creation hymn from the Rig Veda, it's called the Nasadiya Sukta, is much less direct than the Bible is in explaining what happened at the beginning. There are some similarities, of course. The Hindu creation hymn says that one thing, the Sanskrit word is tad ekam, which just literally means that one, breathed by its own nature. Apart from it, there was nothing whatsoever. All that existed was void and formless. By the power of great heat, that one was born. In the beginning, desire, kama, that's the same word as in the Kama Sutra, it literally means sexual desire, descended on it. That was the primal seed. And the Sanskrit word for seed here, retas, is in the sense of reproductive organs. That was the primal seed born of the mind. So contrast this with the very first passage of the Bible. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. So here we see some similarities, the formless void, nothing separating night from day. But then there are some very obvious differences as well. In the biblical account, there is the watery void out of which God separates the heavens from the earth, the water from dry land. God is something external to the material world, and he is shaping creation. Whereas in the Rig Veda, there is no God separate from creation. There is no consciousness separate from creation. Everything, consciousness and matter, is there lumped into one at the very beginning of time. And it's only somehow by some process of the universe somehow becoming aroused by itself It is giving birth to differentiation of matter within itself. So rather than God creating, acting on the physical world from outside of it, in the Vedic story, everything is completely self-contained. So time and space, consciousness and matter, everything is right there. One substance, tadekam, one thing, right from the very beginning. So the biblical creation is very dualist. There's God and there's everything else. The Hindu Vedic story is somewhat more mysterious. Where does this differentiation between even mind and matter, for instance, that such a distinction isn't there in the Rig Veda? The implication that sexual reproduction is a natural element of cosmogenesis, or the genesis of the cosmos. When does sexual reproduction figure into Genesis, the creation story in the Bible? Well, it doesn't happen until after the primal sin, until after Adam and Eve eat the apple and are ejected from the Garden of Eden, right? It is sexual reproduction is a consequence of the fall of man, of the primordial sin of humankind. Not so at all in the Vedic tradition. This becomes important in later Hinduism when we encounter the unity of male and female principles within the divine, represented in Shiva as Ardhanarishvara, or the Lord who is half man and half woman. Shiva, who is within one figure, within one single divine principle, both male and female energies. He is Shiva, but he is united necessarily with Shakti. Shakti is the supreme goddess, the embodiment of all female energy and the animating principle of all matter.
Also, because they never nailed down God's name or description in the earliest Hindu texts, later Hindu tradition had a great deal of flexibility in terms of how they presented and described God, or really how they presented and described the very concept of the divine itself. So, some later Hindus would say that the whole observable world around us, including we ourselves, are really characters in the dream of Vishnu, who is the supreme God who lies asleep on the cosmic ocean, dreaming this dream in which we are all merely characters. Those who are able to see through this cosmic illusion, Maya, as Hindus call it, are able to recognize their own true nature as a part of the mind of God, somehow ontologically separate from God's creation, as we do in the Christian case, but rather a unity of all things in essence within the mind of God, rather than the dualism of the Jewish and Christian Bible, God and then everything else, material creation, other souls. This kind of Hinduism embraces a form of monism. Really, in essence, everything is just a part of Vishnu's dream. There are various other schools of Hindu theology which also celebrate divinity within all things. And calling yourself divine or calling yourself God from the point of view of Western monotheism is usually regarded as something heretical and dangerous. I mean, we have numerous examples of people being put to death in the Western tradition for making such claims. In Hinduism, no problem. To recognize God or divinity within all living beings is a natural consequence of a creation story that makes no distinction between the form of consciousness that arises there at the very beginning of time and the consciousness that lives in all of us, what Hindus refer to as the unity of the Brahman, or the cosmic soul, and the Atman, or the individual soul. Every living sentient being has an individual soul, which is itself part of God, part of Brahman. This was the origin of the Hindu greeting Namaste, which literally means reverence or worship to you. So namas means bending over, prostrating yourself in order to worship the divinity within the person you're greeting. Te means to you, so worship to you, reverence to you, obeisance to you. It's a completely different theological concept of how divinity works in the Hindu tradition, stemming from this much more ambiguous and monistic account of how the world came into being. So